Imagine living decades under whispers, rumors, and secrets. And finally, at the age of 55, Bishop Herman Murray stands before the world and admits everything. What he revealed shocked his congregation, stunned the media, and left even his closest allies speechless. Tonight, we uncover the truth that no one dared to speak for years. And the story is far darker and more complicated than anyone ever imagined. For decades, Bishop Herman Murray has been a towering figure in his community, a man admired for his charisma, leadership, and spiritual guidance. But behind the pulpit, whispers of scandal and secret controversies have followed him for years. Until now, no one knew the full truth. Tonight, you won't just hear the rumors, you'll see what really happened. From hidden conflicts to long-buried secrets, Bishop Murray's revelation at 55 is a story that will shock even those who thought they knew him. We'll take you inside the moments that led to this confession, explore the impact on his followers, and reveal details that the mainstream media barely dared to touch. By the end of this video, you'll understand why this admission is more than just a personal confession. It's a turning point in the narrative of faith, power, and public perception. But what happened that finally made him speak out? And why now, after so many years of silence? The answer is more startling than anyone could have predicted. Bishop Herman Murray's story begins far from the headlines, in the quiet corners of a small community church where he first discovered his calling. From a young age, people noticed something magnetic about him. He had the kind of presence that drew people in. His voice carried conviction, his words promised hope, and his faith seemed unshakable. By the time he was in his 20s, he was already preaching to crowds that rivaled entire city blocks. But success didn't come without pressure. As his influence grew, so did the scrutiny. Colleagues whispered about his unconventional methods. Parishioners gossiped about his late-night visits and private meetings, and the media started to take notice. What made him remarkable was also what made him vulnerable, a combination of ambition, charisma, and a private life that few could penetrate. By the time he officially became bishop, Herman Murray wasn't just a spiritual leader, he was a public figure. Sermons were broadcast on television, interviews circulated online, and every appearance became an event. Yet behind the cameras, there were signs of tension, secrecy, and choices that would later fuel the rumors everyone whispered about, but no one could confirm. One insider recalls a moment that would later become legendary in church circles, a tense phone call in the middle of the night that left even the most loyal staff members uneasy. What was being discussed? No one knows for sure, but it hinted at pressures and secrets that would follow Murray for decades. And this is where the first mystery emerges. How does a man so admired, so trusted, accumulate whispers that linger for years? The answer begins in this early chapter of his life, and it's not what most people expect. But what happened next would set the stage for the controversy that would haunt him and ultimately force him to finally speak. Even as Bishop Herman Murray's public image soared, shadows followed him. Rumors began quietly, whispered in church hallways, and shared over late-night phone calls among parishioners and colleagues. At first, they were small, questions about his finances, his relationships, or his late-night schedules. But over time, these whispers grew louder, more insistent, until they became a persistent cloud hovering over every sermon, every public appearance. What made the rumors so potent wasn't just the content, it was the contrast between his public persona and the private questions people couldn't stop asking. Bishop Murray had always been a man of conviction, preaching integrity, honesty, and accountability. And yet, the very people who looked up to him began to wonder if there were cracks behind the polished image. Some insiders spoke in hushed tones of secret meetings with influential figures, of charitable donations that never seemed to reach their intended recipients, and of lifestyle choices that didn't align with the message he preached from the pulpit. None of it was ever fully proven, but the perception was enough. Gossip spread faster than facts, and soon, no church event, no sermon, and no public announcement was free from scrutiny. By his 40s, the rumors weren't just external. They began to seep into his inner circle. Staff members who had once been loyal found themselves questioning decisions, wondering what was being hidden. Friends expressed concern, noting subtle changes in his behavior, moments of irritation, long silences, and a guarded demeanor that betrayed a man under pressure. And yet Bishop Murray never addressed them publicly. For years, he stayed silent, hoping the rumors would fade. But silence, as anyone in the public eye knows, often becomes confirmation in the minds of the public. Every passing year without clarification only fueled speculation until the questions became impossible to ignore. Then came the pivotal moments that changed everything. A series of leaked documents, private messages, and anonymous interviews began to surface. They didn't fully prove anything, but they gave enough substance for the media and the public to demand answers. It was the kind of pressure that can break reputations, careers, and even the most disciplined individuals. And here's the turning point. Despite decades of silence, at 55, Bishop Murray finally chose to confront the rumors head-on. But what he revealed was far more shocking than anyone could have anticipated. Some of it confirmed suspicions. Some of it completely upended everything people thought they knew. And yet, even in his confession, there were moments that left the audience questioning what is true and what remains hidden. This is where the story takes a dramatic twist, a revelation that not only impacts Bishop Murray's legacy, but also sends shockwaves through the entire faith community he built. But before we reach that moment, we need to explore the forces that pushed him toward this decision. What made a man of faith, influence, and decades-long leadership finally say, "Enough, I must speak"? The day Bishop Herman Murray finally addressed the rumors was unlike any other in his long career. The church auditorium was packed, cameras lined the aisles, and the eyes of the congregation and the world were fixed on him. For decades, he had preached about honesty, redemption, and facing one's truth. Yet now, the tables were turned. He was the one standing in front of judgment, expectation, and years of unspoken speculation. He began slowly, almost hesitantly. Every word carried weight. Every pause amplified the tension in the room. "I've lived with secrets, longer than I ever should have," he said, his voice cracking slightly. The audience, accustomed to hearing sermons filled with certainty and confidence, felt a chill. This was different. This was raw, human, unfiltered. Bishop Murray then began to address the specific rumors that had haunted him for decades. Some confirmed what the public suspected: private mistakes, moments of weakness, and decisions that were deeply personal but became public fodder. He admitted errors in judgment, acknowledging that his actions had consequences, not just for him, but for his family, his staff, and his congregation. But it wasn't all confession. There were revelations that stunned even the most devoted followers. Allegations that had circulated for years, dismissed as gossip, were confirmed. Yet in the same breath, he provided context, showing the complexity of his life and the pressures he faced. Behind the headlines and whispers were nuanced stories of loyalty, betrayal, and moral struggle. One particularly tense moment came when he spoke about a betrayal from someone close, a person who leaked sensitive information to the press. The crowd gasped as he described the personal toll this had taken, painting a vivid picture of heartbreak and resilience. And yet, even as he spoke, there was a hint of hope, an acknowledgement that transparency, though painful, could be liberating. By the end of the confession, Bishop Murray's emotional vulnerability had transformed the room. Some members cried openly, others nodded in solemn agreement, and journalists scribbled notes furiously, knowing they were witnessing history. But just when it seemed the story had reached its climax, he dropped a revelation that left everyone in stunned silence, a secret he had kept even from his closest allies, a truth that reframed the entire narrative. This final revelation was both shocking and deeply human. It exposed the complexity of a man caught between faith, public expectation, and personal fallibility. It also reminded everyone watching that even figures of immense power and influence are not immune to mistakes, pressure, and the burden of secrets. And here's the cliffhanger that kept everyone talking long after the cameras stopped rolling. What exactly does this confession mean for the future of Bishop Murray, his ministry, and the community that looked up to him? Some questions were answered, but many more remained, and the world was left waiting, questioning, and speculating. The moment Bishop Herman Murray's confession hit the public, the world reacted with a mix of shock, disbelief, and relentless curiosity. Social media exploded. Twitter feeds filled with heated debates, TikTok clips circulated showing excerpts of the emotional speech, and YouTube channels dissected every word. For someone who had been both revered and scrutinized, this was the tipping point. Decades of rumors finally met the light of truth. Inside the church, the fallout was immediate. Congregants were divided. Some expressed deep empathy, believing that honesty and redemption were at the heart of his admission. "It takes courage to admit your faults in front of everyone," said one devoted follower, visibly emotional. Others felt betrayed, struggling to reconcile the bishop they admired with the man revealed in the confession. Private meetings erupted among church elders, staff, and ministers, as the leadership worked to manage both internal morale and public perception. The media frenzy was relentless. Headlines ranged from sympathetic to sensational. Some praised him for bravery and transparency. Others questioned his integrity and long-term leadership. National talk shows debated the morality and implications of his actions, while investigative reporters dug deeper, seeking more revelations behind the revelations. Every statement he had made was analyzed, every pause scrutinized, and every facial expression dissected. But it wasn't just public opinion that shifted. Bishop Murray's personal relationships felt the tremors most acutely. Family members, long shielded from scrutiny, were suddenly in the spotlight. Close friends wrestled with understanding the private struggles he had endured. Former allies in ministry questioned whether loyalty could survive the dual weight of truth and public perception. And for Bishop Murray himself, the emotional burden of decades-long secrecy finally gave way to both relief and fear. Relief that the truth was out, and fear of what the next chapter would bring. One particularly tense moment came when an anonymous letter, circulated within the church leadership, threatened legal action over certain disclosures. This stirred panic among staff and parishioners, and for a brief time, it seemed as though the confession could ignite more chaos than clarity. The bishop, however, stood firm, emphasizing accountability, repentance, and the hope of rebuilding trust. Internationally, the story resonated far beyond the church walls. Faith-based communities debated the balance between transparency and privacy. Social commentators explored the human element of a public figure weighed down by expectations and secrecy. And everywhere, one question lingered. Could a confession truly change the narrative after decades of rumor and speculation? The fallout, however, had another layer that many missed. It sparked a deeper conversation about leadership, morality, and the high cost of silence. For younger pastors and spiritual leaders, Murray's confession became a cautionary tale, proof that even the most admired figures are vulnerable, and that avoiding difficult truths only amplifies eventual scrutiny. Yet, amid the chaos and controversy, there were subtle moments of hope. Supporters spoke of redemption, forgiveness, and the transformative power of owning one's story. And in the midst of conflicting opinions, one undeniable truth emerged. Bishop Herman Murray had changed the conversation forever. What had been whispers in the shadows was now a public dialogue, and nothing would ever be the same again.